Hey Andy, we'll just wait a few more minutes for some more people to enter the room. It looks like it's filling up. Um, if you've just recently joined us, just give us a little message in the comments. Tell us where you're from and why you've joined. And if you've got any questions, pop them in during the webinar. Right,
Like and share,
looks
guys. Like and share.
yeah, like and share. Okay, guys, look, let's get started. It looks like the room's filled up. I'm sure some people will be joining us during the event, but this has been a long time coming, Andy, because obviously I joined Agilio, what, almost a year ago. You're my first boss, and this is the opportunity now to sort of share the stage with you, so to speak, and for us to have a conversation that we can sort of share our industry experience and knowledge. So, yeah, the title of today is one of those titles that made me feel a little bit cringy, Andy. It's the six-figure patient rules, how to spot and keep the right patients. So I'd like you to take it away, Andy. What do you mean by that? And I know it's a really catchy title, but I know it
Yeah,
could probably bring people from different angles and bring a bit of skepticism, right? So what's your play on the title, what it means, and how we're going to take this conversation further today during this webinar?
thanks, Prav. And before we start, I will say the last 12 months have been the most unique 12 months of my career working with you. You're a force to be reckoned with. And I'm really pleased that we've done this. It is, like you said, a long time coming.
Yeah,
And I think we both come at things from very different angles, but actually they really complement each other. So hopefully, it was a sprat. Do you know, the six-figure rule and the six-figure, adding six figures onto a dental practice is a bit of a sprat, but it can be done, and I've seen it. Do you know, um, whilst I was at Portman Dentex, do you know, me and the team acquired over 120 practices. We've seen
yeah,
some real big practices join the group. But it's all about focusing on the right patients. And I think that's the key to here. It's the ones who keep coming back, the ones that choose premium treatments, and then ultimately the ones that will go on to recommend you. There's no other secret than that, you know. And I think what we're going to do today is really focus on that part of it and how people can significantly improve their profitability. And that could be in many ways. It could be their top line revenue or their bottom line profit, you know, but they can significantly do it by focusing on that area. So I'm going to turn this back on you now, Prav. Do you know, so when you
okay.
hear six-figure patients, you said it's cringy, but how do you think practices will respond? And ultimately, do you
Well,
think is achievable?
of course it is, right? It's very, I mean, look, you've acquired 100 plus practices, right? And you've probably spoke to maybe two or three times that many
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you don't acquire everyone you speak to, right? So you've seen it all. And I guess historically, you've seen what practices have achieved during their growth phase. You've seen those practices post acquisition and what they do, whether they stay stagnant, they dip, or they grow. And I'm sure there's certain patterns and rules to those that do grow. But if somebody comes to me as an agency and says, look, Prav, I want to stake 100K on my practice turnover over the next 12 months, what does that look like? Yeah, it's very, very achievable, but it depends on the practice. So for me, if it's a practice that's got a mix of private and NHS, um, it's a really, really easy goal to smash. A lot of us make assumptions that because a patient is an NHS patient that they can't afford private dentistry. And the fact is they've just not been offered it. And if you take a group like that we've worked with very, very closely, Dental Beauty, for example, Dev's group, their whole business model is built on buying mixed practices and converting to private. And you consistently see them adding north of 100K, easy peasy for them, for those guys, right? Transitioning um, both clinicians and treatments and patients over from NHS to private, and then just exploring those things, looking at the database, and you know, I guess I'll just dive back and forth between mixed and then fully private practices. But if you want to add 100K to your practice, it's one or two implant cases a month
yeah,
over 12 months. It's just that, right?
yeah.
It's three or four orthodontic cases a month. It's a couple of smile makeovers a month. It's a few restorative cases here and there. But as long as you've got a workflow to consistently do that, in fact, that six figure becomes pretty achievable. And then you start having conversations with practices like, well, 6 months in, we're on track for 200K, 250K. What does that
Yeah.
look like? How did that happen? Um, so we're right in terms of the title that you came up for this, Andy. Yeah, it's very, very achievable. But you know, when a practice comes to me and says, "Well, how do we do this?" I know it feels like I'm avoiding the question, but the answer to that question is it depends. And it depends on your current patient base, right? How big's your list? And what can we do with that list? Or do we need to go out to Facebook or Google and do some direct marketing? Can we use a CRM system to mine that database and essentially mine the revenue that's sat in your practice because you've got all those treatment plans that haven't been converted, or you've got all those leads that have been coming in over the last few years that you haven't followed up, or you've had 1,000 patients over the last 3 years who've had extractions and no one's spoken to them about implants. Really, really easy thing. So in answer to your question, Andy, I do think it's very, very achievable. What I'm interested in hearing from you as well is what impact that would have when Andy in his former role was out there acquiring practices and valuing practices, and what that would do to the valuation of the practice if we were to do this.
And it's a good point. And, I'm going to go back a few years now because I've, been at Agilio for 3 years now. So I am going to go back a little bit. And you are right, for every one practice we acquired, we probably saw 5, 6, 10.
Okay.
You have to turn a few stones over before you find the key underneath them, and you mentioned dental beauty specifically. And I agree. What Dev and the team have done there is significant. They bought practices at a pretty low profitability and, like you said, focused on NHS mainly, and flipped them to private and plan patients. And that gives predictable reoccurring revenue and, increased loyalty. And 6 figures, 100 grand is nothing these days. Like you said, it's a couple of treatments of a certain type. When I'm talking 6 figures, I'm talking about like extreme 6 figers. Like, how do you add 500,000, onto your turnover? And I've seen practices do this. So during valuation, there's a big practice in Birmingham, and I went to see them, and I won't disclose who they are, but their EBITDA was probably around 180,000 EBITDA, and a little bit too small for what we were looking at that point in time. So down with the principal. And started talking about what is his ideal, patient. What's the ideal patient? And he didn't know. So what we did is set about taking his database and starting to analyze it out and saying, here's a bunch of your patients that are actually making you no money. They're actually costing you money. Here's some patients you're breaking even on, and here's the one that are the real sweet spot for you. And if you can focus on them, make them stickier, but also mirror them and find more of that type. So what's their socio-demographic, et cetera, and use that to go out and acquire patients of that ilk rather than generally just taking on new patients. And then we went back about 3 years later and he was at 500,000 EBITDA. So he'd focused on it and really, really nailed what he wanted to do with his patient base. And I think that's what you were just saying. And that's with me as a non-digital marketing agency person, saying use your data to your advantage, because that's where you're going to unlock, most of this revenue.
I think 90% of the time, right, practices come to us and they're expecting the answer to their dreams to be a solution that involves digital marketing. Often it doesn't. But before we move on from this conversation, Andy, we're talking about terminology that me and you are totally au fait with. But before I got into the world of selling my practices or even my business to Agilio, I did not have a clue what the word EBITDA meant, what the relevance that was on practice valuation, and what it means. So just for the benefit of those who are tuning in and listening to this, who might be in the position I was in a few years ago, where that word meant nothing to me, and how that translates into the valuation of a practice. So if you could just give us a quick minute on how dental practices are valued and what that word actually means.
Yeah, so you put me on the spot there. I'm going to have to remember the acronym now because it becomes second nature to me as well. So it's earnings before income, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So it's
Yeah.
basically they use it as a health check of your business, so the way a practice is valued is they'll take all of the incomings and outgoings, make any adjustments, make adjustments for an owner operator not being in the business anymore, and if you're selling to a corporate, what costs the corporate would bring to you, and then that would generate an EBITDA figure, so the kind of bottom line of the business, and a practice will then be paid a multiple on that. And I'm not going to go into multiples today,
No.
because they'll be wildly varied from when I was buying practices. Because, if you think 3-4 years ago, we didn't have interest rates as they are now. There's a
Different
little bit more.
landscape.
Yeah, and I'm not a valuer anymore. So what I don't want to do is annoy all the valuers out there by them saying, Andy Sloan saying that I can get X for my practice. What I can tell you is a harmonized practice. So a harmonized practice from a patient engagement point of view, and a marketing point of view, and also with a very strong retention strategy as well, would easily get 1.5 to 2 times more EBITDA in consideration than one that isn't. So when we're talking about, what we are today, 6 figures may not be the revenue that you generate. It may be the profit that you get, or the return that you get when you come to exit your business. It can be both. But within your business today, and I think this is the most important part, in your business today, in your database today, there's easily 6 figures worth of additional revenue / profit that you can get hold of.
Totally agree with you, Andy. And just to paraphrase what you've said there, the way my understanding of practice valuations has always been, it's your net profit, and they do some weird calculations to make some adjustments for the fact that, if there's stuff you've put through the business that maybe you shouldn't have done, that all gets added back in. If, for example, you're not getting paid as an associate, they add factor that back in as a calculation. So some practices come to me and go, oh, my net profit's like 500k a year. And I say, well, how do you pay yourself? I only need 5 to 7k a month to live on. So I just take that out of the business and said, right, okay. And if you sold the business for the next 6 years, would you be happy that practice just paid you 5 to 6k a month to do what you're doing now? Absolutely not. And so factoring them in now as an associate brings their sort of profit levels down. But interesting point that you made there, there's 2 things there, is that, something as small as a 20k increase on your net adjusted profit, or that EBIT figure that we're talking about, right,
Yeah.
could end up getting you at the lower tax rate when you get paid easily an extra 100 to 140 grand, right, in your pocket,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's pretty powerful, and what a lot of people don't understand. But what's really interesting, and I didn't know about this until we had this conversation offline, Andy, which is the profile of the income. And what you were saying is so let's say the overall turnover of the practice is X, but 30% of that is, retained plan revenue. So it's been consistently generating plan revenue for the last 5 years, and consistently every single month, 35k comes in off the back of a plan.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say without doing any work, but you've got to do work to service that plan. But that's guaranteed income. You're not having to go hunting for fresh blood or those Invisalign cases or those implant cases. That is there and consistent. Is what you're telling me that proportion of the revenue, as a seller, one could argue that that's worth a 1 to 2 times higher multiple than the rest of the revenue?
100%. And, I think that when people are looking to sell their practice, they miss that trick. So lenders, private equity, backers like predictable reoccurring revenue. It gives them comfort. And what you can do is you can show churn as well. So if you've got a patient list of 2,000, and I'm going to use, and you've got half of those on a plan, when you come in to sell your business, you should be saying, we want to break down the valuation into reoccurring revenue and non-reoccurring revenue. And the non-reoccurring revenue is the fee per item stuff, they're paying it and go in a purely private practice. The reoccurring stuff is they're going to pay you whether they come or not. And, the caregivers in us should say we want them to come regularly. When they come, they add cost on. When they don't come, there's no cost there, other than the administration of the plan. So I would argue And people may agree or disagree with me. It's my opinion that when you come to sell your business, if you've got a robust payment plan in place, a patient plan in place, you would get 1 to 2 times higher value than if you didn't at all.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you on one of those points, Andy, which is when those patients turn up, it costs you,
It does.
and when they don't, you're kind of making money. So analogous to those come January the 5th, they join the gym,
Yeah.
12-month subscription, they rock up 6 times a year. That's who the gyms love because they're not tattering up the equipment, they're not coming through the door, but they're paying the subs. And so one could assume that plan membership is like that. But I would argue that if they do turn up, it is income generating because unlike a gym, there's very little else you can buy other than going in and knackering up the machines. Maybe a protein shake here or there, or a bottle of water or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But when I come in as a plan patient and all you're getting is 80 quid or 50 quid or whatever my checkup and hygiene is, and we all know that from an hourly rate perspective, that's essentially loss making, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Compared to doing any kind of what people refer to as high ticket dentistry, implants, ortho, cosmetic bonding, you name it, right? So, but I work with a lot of practices who will see these patients, but off the back of that, there'll be treatment planning crowns, there'll be treatment planning ortho, there'll be treatment planning all kinds of restorative dentistry. And it's because they've got a process in place for that, right? 70% of patients on plan will have a degree of crowding. So if we're not talking to them about orthodontic treatment, there's something wrong. And so I actually think that although sometimes dentists undervalue plans and they'll say, oh, well, I don't want to put a patient on a plan because it kills my hourly rate. And then less patients are going to come in, right? But more patients are going to come in and they're going to squeeze that time up where I could be doing a higher hourly rate. But actually, if you changed your checkup process and if you actively spoke to those patients and you scanned every one of those patients and triaged them in the right way, they'd be your high ticket pipeline.
Can I just give you an example of that then? So the practice I've talked about in Birmingham, part of the ideal patient profile that we kind of looked at with data, he went off and got a CRM. And then the CRM was set up and it was we're talking a few years ago now. So, and I'm not saying it was an Agilio CRM, but it was a CRM. In fairness, there's a few of them out there. And what he did is everyone that came in as an extraction suddenly went into a marketing channel for an implant. And he would start to continuously market to them with pictures of someone that's had an implant placed where they've had an extraction and what the benefit of that individual was. Similarly, someone who comes in for hygiene then goes into a whitening track and says, whilst you've got lovely clean teeth, why don't you brighten them up? It took the onus away from the clinician to sell, which we all know clinicians aren't naturally salespeople. And it started to convert more treatments. So when I said that, the EBITDA went up to the level that it did, it was because he put systems in place to communicate with his existing patients. And I agree with you, plan patients are sales opportunities. And if you look at it from an accountancy point of view, you want that gym membership. They pay you, but they don't come in because you don't have the cost. But then you look at the revenue optimization side of it, and they're saying, as you said, we want them to come in because they're an upsell or cross-sell opportunity. So if you can kind of have both, you kind of have your cake and eat it. You've got patients that are coming in because one, they want good oral health, which is number one. That's what we're here to deliver. But then secondly, they're conscious about their smiles. They're conscious about other treatment types. So they are that upsell opportunity. But it's not always reliant on the clinician. It's reliant on the systems and processes of the practice to support the clinician. And I'm prime example, composite veneers, recently done, went in for a hygiene appointment, ended up, signing up to get them, made a massive difference to my life. I've now booked regular hygiene appointments, so I'm in the industry and I'm the easiest to sell to. But it's because of what they did. It's how they made me feel and the follow-up of it that really, really got me into, I want to do something different with my smile. At 48 years old, I wanted to do
Yeah.
something different so it can be done. But I agree with you, Prav.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always, with every client that I speak to, I always champion plans. And I think one of the things that with the clients that I have worked with traditionally over the last sort of 17 years, they have been those practices who are heavily private, focused primarily on implants, ortho, composite bonding, porcelain veneers, and high-end restorative dentistry. Patient comes in, spends a truckload of money, goes back to the general dentist, right? And they're repeating that cycle every month to hit their baseline costs, right? And every month, at the beginning of the month, there is that stress to bring in that level of income to hit your costs, pay your wages, do everything, and make some money on top.
Yeah.
And I always champion plan to them. And sometimes it can take me a couple of years to get them around to the fact that plan is going to be a good thing for the business. The one thing that I didn't know that you taught me was this addition to the valuation piece, right? Which is
Yeah.
a little bit that I'm going to steal straight from you and start using that in my conversations with practices. But actually, from a like a revenue generation point of view, a guy called Tiff Qureshi, who I've worked with for many years, talks about the everyday checkup with these plan patients. And, I learned from him that, 70 odd percent of patients have got crooked teeth.
Yeah.
Now, you can just crack on and just have the checkup and say, well, everything looks healthy and it's fine and your gums are not bleeding and your x-rays are fine and you've got no caries. Come back and see me in 6 months. And all he does is takes pictures of all the teeth and says, do you know these teeth here? They're going to start moving some more. And when they do move, your teeth are going to start clashing and chipping. And that whole concept is called the envelope of function. Now, we can prevent that happening, or we can just wait till that happens and in your own time. And then he says 6 months later, this patient comes in and goes, Prav, I've just chipped the tooth, I've just chipped my tooth. That thing happened. Can we do that orthodontic thing? So it's almost like you're planting the seeds during the consultation. And so there's just so much value in plan that I just think that for a lot of practices that are too busy doing that sort of dentistry to give that part of their business a consideration, should really give it a second thought.
So I'm going to challenge you in a second on marketing because you've challenged me on valuations and plans. So I'm going to flip it back to you. But one of the things I will say lastly on plan, we've done a lot of analysis on plan practices, and we see that on a patient base, the average penetration is only 20 to 25%. So 20 to 25% of a practice's patient list are on a plan. There's 75 to 80% of missing profitability in that list alone. And that's because the reason you said, they think that plan patients are not going to be as profitable. Plan patients are probably easier to sell to because they've already bought into the oral hygiene program that you offer. Exactly. I would say that if anyone can get their plan penetration from 25 to 50%, it's going to add a significant six-figure value to the profitability of their business. And that's through marketing campaigns as well. But anyway, I just want to flip it back to marketing for a bit because we've talked about plan is a retention strategy in essence. You're keeping your patients sticky to the practice. But what about acquiring new patients? Growth isn't all necessarily about more patients. Growth's about the right patient. So, what would you say from an attraction point of view is the best way to find the right patients, not just more patients?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question the way I answer every single question that people ask me, and the answer to that question is it depends.
Okay,
right, and what I mean by that, it depends on the practice. So sometimes the practice will come to me and say, right, okay, I want to generate more revenue, or I want more profit in the business, or whatever. I want some more high ticket dentistry coming through the door. So it depends on your ability to be able to communicate and sell to those patients. It depends on your ability to be able to fulfill those treatments. So sometimes the practice will come to me and go, do you know what, Prav, we could do with more implant cases through the door. Happy days. We'll talk to you about the strategy of getting more implant cases through the door. But first tell me this. Do you have an implant surgeon?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have a guy who comes in once a month. Okay, well, that's great, right? But if I was to run a campaign now and you said to every patient that inquired, the only time you can have a consultation with him is on the last Friday of every month, you are missing a massive trick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then also what you've got to bear in mind is that, let's say you're paying that implant surgeon 45-50%, right? Okay, it's bringing revenue in, well, that's going. So I might speak to the principal and say, if you're still actively engaged in clinical dentistry, what is the treatment that you offer that is going to knock your hourly rate up, where you can push off maybe some of your planned stuff to an associate, and so generate more profitability and income for your practice? However, my it depends question comes in, because some practice owners will say, I don't want to do more clinical dentistry. I want to start stepping back.
Yeah.
So I do want to refer it to someone else. And so I'm just putting that out there, because that it depends is really, really important, and it depends what you want. Now, going back to answering your question, what I would say is about getting the right type of patients is first about identifying what they are and who they are and what they want, right? Now, some practices pitch themselves on being a value-based practice and they compete on price. Some practices pitch themselves at being right bang in the middle of that place of value and very expensive. And some people position themselves right at the top end, and they're not based on offers or open days and things like that. So once we establish that, then the next thing we need to do is figure out, well, what is the marketing message that's going to go out to those patients that's going to make them say, I'm interested in inquiring with you, potentially handing over my name, email address, and phone number to have a conversation with you, right? So let's say we get that marketing message right, and then it goes out through the appropriate channels, whether that's, Facebook, Instagram, Google, TikTok, no matter what that is, it comes through to a landing page. They fire their contact details over, and then they come to you, right? So we establish that piece right there. And if it's let's say it's a practice that prides themselves on quality and experience, we need to be talking about in the ad copy that, Dr. Smith has got 35 years experience placing implants. He only places premium quality Straumann implants, for example, right? There's 1,000 smile makeovers, 500 5-star Google reviews, whatever, all the social proof that comes with it, and maybe content that comes with that piece. And I know that part of the conversation is way beyond the scope of today's conversation, right? And maybe we'll do another session on that. But then comes the part, okay, so you get the name, email address, phone number, and their contact details. And then what do your team do with that? And that is where it all falls to pieces, in my opinion, for the majority of practices, right? It's marketing is not just marketing, it's sales and marketing. And from my perspective, it's that, when do you call the patient? When do you email the patient? What's the nature of that conversation? Oh, I tried to call them, they didn't pick up. It was a waste of time. At some point, there was a human being who thought that it was important enough to hand over their name, their email address, and phone number. Yeah. You don't just give that out willy-nilly. Trust me, I've tried it enough times in nightclubs when I was a young lad. I got absolutely nowhere, right? So, look, getting a name, a phone number, and an email address is challenging in itself. That patient showed some intent and interest. But I have no doubt that that patient has also inquired at a handful of other practices.
Yeah.
And if they beat you to getting through to them, or if they have a better or deeper or higher quality conversation, or more memorable conversation, they're not gonna get back to you. And so the response rate and the sales process is so important as part of, especially in today's era, where I'm saying, looking at patients today compared to 5 years ago, they are having 4 or 5 consultations before they give one of them the thumbs up.
Yeah, and so going back to the question about growth isn't about more patients; it's about the right patients,
the right ones.
You can find the right patients, and there was a stat that came out recently that 70% of new patients to dental practices in the UK came via a Google search. So the intent is there. If you're going into Google and put in I don't know, Invisalign in Chester, as an example, your intent is that you want straighter teeth, you want that treatment. And I agree with you, Joe. So the attraction part is there. You can find out who the high value patients are, the ones that are more likely to accept the higher treatment, plan than others. And then you've got the conversion part of it, which is sometimes, well, no, in a lot of cases, a letdown because they're either not systematically using a CRM to prioritize the communication with these patients, or they've not got people, like you said, to be able to get on it quickly. I'm quite an impulsive buyer. So if I search Invisalign in Chester, it's because I want to buy it. I don't want to buy it in 3 months' time when I've spoke to somebody, because they're only in every third month. So it's there and then. And then we talked about plans. Once you've got those guys in, it's about the retention of them, so it's that attract, convert, and retain strategy. And if you got all three right, that 100K that you talked about would be 500K or 600K or 700K, because you've got that well-oiled machine in place within the practice. So, but it is, I mean, there's a whole series of webinars we could delve into here. And today it was about how do you add six figures onto it. I think that what we've done is show just in a very short space of time that there's multiple ways of doing that. But it's about understanding what the priorities of your practice are, what's your business priority, before you can then go out and effectively, implement a strategy of this ilk. Should we put a poll on to see what people on the webinar think is which of the outcomes would make the biggest difference to their practice? Because we've touched on high value patients, higher treatment acceptance, stronger loyalty and referrals, and higher practice valuations. So there's like four big areas there that people, could focus on that would make a huge difference to their practice. So we'll put a poll up, and the people who are on the webinar, choose what you think would make the biggest difference to your practice, just so we can get a temperature check of whether we're, on the right vein or not here.
So for those who are listening, what you're saying, Andy, so you want them to choose from, of the following, which would make the biggest impact on their practice from their perception. More high value patients. The same patients, but with a higher treatment plan acceptance rate. So increasing conversion rate, getting more loyalty and referrals from their existing customer base, i.e. signing more people up to plan and more word of mouth referrals, or actually doing something to elevate valuation so they can sail off into the sunset and do whatever they want once they've sold their practice.
Yeah, I'm really interested to know, because everyone's at different parts of the journey. Some people will be saying it's high value patients that they're looking for. Some people will be saying, I'm thinking of what the next phase of my life is, and it may not be in this practice anymore. So it'd be really interesting to know. And then from an Agilio point of view, and the reason that we decided to do this today, and really come online and talk, was about iGrow. And how that helps all three areas of attracting new patients using the fresh and the expertise that you and your team have got, converting patients using Dendgrow and the CRM system that's part of our suite, and having that link between the agency and the CRM. So everything that you're spending on behalf of a client is tracked within the CRM system. But then more importantly, the retention of those patients. So when you've got them and that they're the ideal patients for you, how you can retain them and get that higher valuation. I think that we're now, I know we're the only ones that connect all those three areas together and can offer them to dental practices. So you've got that end-to-end journey within one ecosystem. And that's really powerful. And I think that, we've got quite a lot of people on this webinar right now. And it'll be just really interesting to know, which part of the journey they're on right now.
And off the back of that, Andy, whichever one gets the highest votes, we will focus our next session on that.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So we'll dive.
No, I think that's the right thing to do. But I mean, in the meantime, though, if anyone, thinks that they benefit from a more personal discussion on how to explore iGrow, and see how it can strengthen both the revenue and practice valuation, you can click yes on the webinar now and book a call with Agilio. Prav and I do contact the patient, their practices ourselves. So you never know, you might get one of us giving you a call. I'm not sure whether that's a good or bad thing, but you never know.
Yeah, no, it's been a great conversation, Andy. Appreciate that. There was just one last point, actually, that you mentioned, and I know it's sort of diving back into the content, but it was about how a lot of people make their decisions through these local searches, like we said, Invisalign in Chester or composite bond in Chester. I can't remember the exact term, right? And we were talking about marketing strategy earlier, and then attracting from Google ads, PPC, this, that, and the other. And I think another strategy that's massively overlooked is actually utilizing your own patient base to get more Google reviews. Because I know if I'm in another country and I want to decide where I'm going for breakfast, where I'm going for dinner, right? Not only will I look at the star rating, I will
Yeah.
read the reviews, and
Yeah.
more specifically, the reviews about that specific, I don't know, avocado on toast, right? Or whatever it is. Do you see what I mean? And so
Yeah.
if we translate it to patients, it's like, how many reviews have you got for implants, ortho, so on and so forth? And those naturally popping up on search, right? Is AI now, right? Is ChatGPT now pulling data from those reviews and recommending you? Because that is a big part of what this zero-click search is all about now. So I just wanted to finish up on that and just leave that as a bit of food for thought for everyone that, look, there's one thing that you can all do today, and that is ask every single patient that walks through your door for a Google review.
I agree. Yeah, I use TripAdvisor like it's, my best friend
Yeah.
when I'm away.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah,
use it
of course we do.
so my friend's in hospitality, and
Yeah.
we go and visit him every now and again. And if he does something, or if he says something to me I don't like, I just go TripAdvisor to put him back in his place. I would never do that, but that's how
No.
it is. Do you know what I mean? I
It
totally
is.
agree with you. Yeah, people
Very
are
powerful.
worried about reviews because they think that a bad review will actually, be a bad thing for them. Everyone's going to have bad reviews at some point in your life, but if you can outweigh the bad ones with a load of good ones because you're asking every patient to do it, it doesn't matter.
No.
Perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. Andy, thanks for your time.
That's all right. And we'll catch up soon.
Yes.